In the glittering world of Hollywood's golden age, some stars were heroes, some were lovers, and a few became the very face of evil. In that special category of on-screen villainy, one man's shadow loomed larger and darker than almost any other: Burt Lancaster. With a grin that could curdle milk and eyes that held a terrifying intensity, Lancaster played some of cinema's most corrupt and unforgettable monsters. His performances were so chilling, so convincing, that for a generation of moviegoers, it was easy to wonder if the man off-screen was just as sinister as the characters he brought to life. But was he really Hollywood's most evil man? Or was the truth something far more shocking? The story of Burt Lancaster isn't just about the roles that define screen villainy. It's a doorway into the real, hidden scandals of the Golden Age. It's a story that reveals that while Lancaster was playing a monster on a soundstage, the true corruption was often happening right beside him in the private lives of the people he worked with every single day. The answer to who was truly evil in that gilded world is not what you think. Because in Hollywood, the greatest performances aren't always on the screen. To understand why anyone would even ask the question, you just have to look at his filmography. It's a masterclass in moral decay, a gallery of characters so profoundly corrupt they crawl under your skin and stay there. He wasn't just playing bad guys. He was crafting portraits of human darkness with a terrifying precision that few actors have ever matched. The cornerstone of this on-screen reputation came in 1957 with Asterisk, Sweet Smell of Success Asterisk. In it, Lancaster plays J.J. Hunsaker, a powerful and poisonous Broadway gossip columnist who wields his influence like a weapon. Hunsaker isn't a gangster with a gun or a cackling madman. His evil is quiet, intellectual, and utterly absolute. He sits at his usual table in a nightclub, a spider at the center of a web of fear, and with a few softly spoken words, he can build a career or shatter a life. His dialogue, penned by the legendary Clifford Odets, is like acid. Phrases like, "Match me, Sydney," aren't requests but commands, dripping with condescending power. He calls a sycophantic press agent, played by Tony Curtis, a cookie full of arsenic, a perfect description of their toxic world. Lancaster's portrayal is a chilling study in control. With his thick-rimmed glasses and elegant suits, he's the picture of sophisticated authority, but behind that facade is a deeply disturbed man. His obsession with controlling his younger sister's life reveals a moral void that's terrifying to watch. The film was so sharp, so cynical, and Lancaster's performance so venomous, audiences couldn't help but wonder if some of that darkness came from the actor himself. He seemed to understand the very mechanics of cruelty. Just a few years later, in Elmer Gantry, 1960, he delivered another performance that blurred the line between actor and character, this time winning an Academy Award for it. He played a charismatic, womanizing salesman who reinvents himself as a fiery evangelist. Lancaster's Gantry is a whirlwind of passion and hypocrisy. He can quote scripture with the fervor of a true believer one moment and shamelessly manipulate the faithful for money and power the next. He is a con man who sells salvation. Lancaster, a known religious skeptic, was drawn to the role to make a statement against the commercialization of faith. This personal conviction fueled his performance, giving it an authenticity that was both captivating and deeply unsettling. He portrayed Gantry not as a simple charlatan, but as a complex man, perhaps seduced by his own lies, which made the character all the more dangerous. Audiences saw a man who could sell you damnation with a smile, and they gave him an Oscar for it, further cementing the idea that Lancaster had a unique insight into the nature of evil. His career was filled with these morally gray figures, starting with his film debut in the 1946 noir classic The Killers. He played the Swede, a doomed ex-boxer who passively accepts his own murder. establishing him as a star tangled in crime and betrayal. His physique, honed from his years as a circus acrobat, gave his characters an intimidating edge. When he turned that intensity toward portraying a character's dark side, the result was electric. With such a convincing track record of playing sinners and sociopaths, it's no surprise that the public started to merge the actor with his roles. But the truth, as it so often is, was far more complex. The man who portrayed some of cinema's most vile characters was, by almost all credible accounts, a person of remarkable integrity and courage. The darkness he channeled so effectively on camera was a product of his immense talent, not a reflection of his soul. In reality, Burt Lancaster was the polar opposite of the villains he played. While his characters were selfish manipulators, Lancaster himself was a dedicated and vocal liberal activist when it was dangerous to be one. He was an early and outspoken supporter of the civil rights movement, even speaking at Martin Luther King Jr.'s March on Washington in 1963, when the anti-communist witch hunts of the House Un-American Activities Committee, WAC, were tearing Hollywood apart. Lancaster was one of the brave few who signed a letter condemning the committee's actions, risking his career when many chose silence. His progressive politics were so well known that he eventually found himself on President Richard Nixon's enemies list. Far from being the cynical tyrant he played on screen, Lancaster was a man who believed in using his power to protect the vulnerable and was a proud board member of the ACLU. This commitment to principle extended to his professional life. Lancaster challenged the suffocating power of the old Hollywood studio system by co-founding his own independent production company, Hechtel Lancaster. This was a radical move at the time. It gave him the power to champion stories that the major studios were too timid to touch. His company produced many of his most acclaimed films, including Sweet Smell of Success, and was known for tackling socially relevant themes and fighting for racial equality in casting. He wasn't just building a career, he was trying to change the industry from within. His reputation among colleagues was that of a consummate professional. While some said he could be difficult or controlling on set, often a result of his intense focus, he wasn't known for the kind of scandalous behavior that defined many of his contemporaries. He was famously generous, once putting up $150,000 of his own money to finish the anti-war film, Go Tell the Spartans, when it ran out of funding. Director Sidney Pollack once said of him, "You couldn't scare him." He was, in a curious sense, fearless, so the image of Burt Lancaster as an off-screen villain crumbles under the evidence. He was a father to 5 children and a loyal friend who kept his childhood circus partner on his payroll for life. The real story isn't about Lancaster's non-existent dark side. It's about the very real scandals of the world he inhabited and the actors he shared the screen with who didn't need a script to be dangerous. So, if Burt Lancaster wasn't the villain, who was? He played the monster on screen, but he often worked alongside actors whose real-life behavior was far more scandalous than any role he ever took on. These weren't characters in a film noir. They were men whose appetites for power, control, and self-indulgence left a trail of wreckage across the Golden Age. While Lancaster was winning awards for playing fictional villains, the real trouble was hiding in plain sight. Perhaps no actor's career was more intertwined with Lancaster's than Kirk Douglas. They made 7 films together, including classics like Gunfight at the OK Corral. To the public, they were the ultimate pairing of Hollywood tough guys. But behind the scenes, their relationship was colored by a fierce rivalry and Douglas's reputation for being intensely ambitious. While Lancaster was known for his professionalism, Douglas was infamous for his explosive ego. Stories of his difficult on-set behavior are legendary. Even the generally even-tempered Lancaster was known to have clashed with him. Hollywood lore is filled with tales of their rivalry. One famous story alleges that Lancaster would relentlessly mock Douglas for wearing shoe lifts to appear taller, a joke that supposedly brought the famously tough actor to tears. It points to a dynamic that was less friendly camaraderie and more a constant battle of wills. But Douglas's reputation is shadowed by more than just on-set spats. His name has been linked for decades to one of Hollywood's most chilling and unsolved mysteries, the 1949 disappearance of actress Jane Spangler. Spangler, who had a small part in Douglas's film Young Man with a Horn, vanished one night. Her purse was later found in Griffith Park. Inside was a cryptic, unfinished note that read, "Kirk, can't wait any longer. Going to see Dr. Scott." Suspicion naturally fell upon the most famous Kirk in Hollywood. Douglas, who was out of town, proactively called the police to deny knowing her well. He admitted he had talked and kidded with her a bit on set, but insisted their relationship was professional. The police officially cleared him. However, the mystery never faded. Friends told police that Spangler was 3 months pregnant and was seeking an illegal abortion, leading to speculation about the Dr. Scott in the note. The Kirk was never definitively identified, but the association has shadowed Douglas's legacy for over 70 years. No proof of his involvement ever surfaced, but the mystery of Jane Spangler remains a haunting footnote to the golden era dot and sweet smell of success. Tony Curtis played Sidney Falco, a desperate press agent who would sell his soul for a scrap of fame. In real life, Curtis's hunger for validation was just as rapacious, leading him down a path of scandal and betrayal. Born Bernard Schwartz to poor immigrants, he clawed his way to stardom, driven by a desperate need to escape his traumatic childhood. That desperation never left him. He and actress Janet Leigh were one of the most glamorous couples of the 1950s, but their romance was a facade. Curtis was intensely jealous and a serial philanderer. He had Leigh's phone tapped, convinced she was cheating, all while carrying on numerous affairs himself. In his tell-all memoirs, published late in his life, Curtis laid his secrets bare. He claimed he had a passionate affair with Marilyn Monroe during the filming of Some Like It Hot, and that she became pregnant with his child before having a miscarriage. This was a shocking claim made long after Monroe's death, and it remains uncorroborated and disputed by Monroe's biographers. He also famously insulted his vulnerable co-star, once quipping that kissing her was like kissing Hitler, a cruel comment he later tried to walk back. His books were filled with these kinds of bombshells. He wrote about his jealousy of Janet Leigh's Oscar nomination for Psycho, and the affair with a 17-year-old co-star that ended their marriage. He was the living embodiment of the character he played opposite Lancaster, a man with an ice cream face and a soul full of ambition, always hustling and willing to say anything to stay in the spotlight. Before we get to our next star, whose connections to organized crime cast a long shadow over Hollywood, if you're enjoying this look into the hidden history of the Golden Age, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us dig deeper into the secrets that Hollywood has tried to keep buried for decades. Now, back to the scandals. Burt Lancaster shared the screen with Frank Sinatra in the 1953 classic From Here to Eternity. On screen, they were soldiers. Off-screen, Sinatra navigated a world of power, fame, and danger that was far more explosive than any movie plot. While Lancaster was building a reputation for political activism, Sinatra was cultivating connections that, according to rumors, led all the way to the top of organized crime. Sinatra was one of the most powerful entertainers of the 20th century, but his talent was matched by a notoriously volatile temper and long-rumored ties to the mafia. For decades, the FBI kept a file on him that swelled to thousands of pages, documenting his associations with infamous mob bosses like Sam Giancana. While Sinatra always publicly denied any formal connection, the rumors were persistent. It was widely believed that the character of Johnny Fontana in The Godfather, who gets a movie role after the mob makes a studio head an offer he can't refuse, was based on Sinatra. Sinatra's temper was legendary. He was known for violent outbursts, often directed at journalists or anyone who crossed him. His relationships were just as turbulent, most famously his passionate and violent marriage to Ava Gardner. Their love affair was the stuff of legend, filled with screaming matches, thrown bottles, and public brawls that kept the tabloids in business. His influence even reached the White House. He was a key supporter of John F. Kennedy's 1960 campaign, allegedly using his connections to help secure Union votes. Sinatra believed his friendship with JFK would grant him unprecedented access and protection. He even built a new wing on his Palm Springs home for an anticipated presidential visit that was abruptly canceled. Attorney General Robert Kennedy, who was waging war on the mob, convinced his brother to cut all ties with the singer. The public snub reportedly left Sinatra seething. Sinatra lived by his own rules, and his story is a chilling example of how the lines between entertainment, politics, and organized crime blurred during the Golden Age. Ava Gardner lit up the screen with Burt Lancaster in the 1946 film noir, The Killers. It was Lancaster's debut and Gardner's breakout role, making them both superstars. On screen, she was the quintessential femme fatale, impossibly beautiful and dangerous. Off-screen, she lived a life that was just as dramatic, rebellious, and unapologetically scandalous. The studios tried to sell her as a glamorous goddess, but Gardner refused to play the part. She was earthy, foul-mouthed, and fiercely independent in an era that demanded conformity from its female stars. Her personal life was a whirlwind of high-profile, tumultuous relationships, including marriages to Mickey Rooney, Artie Shaw, and most famously, Frank Sinatra. Her marriage to Sinatra was one of Hollywood's most destructive love affairs, a chaotic storm of violent arguments, public brawls, and rampant infidelity, but Gardner's rebellion went beyond her love life. She had a voracious appetite for life, which in the 1950s meant she was often labeled a partier and a drinker, labels far more damning for women than for men. She chafed under the control of the studio system, which saw her as an object to be marketed. Eventually, she left Hollywood for Spain, seeking freedom from the prying eyes of the American press, while many of the men on this list were scandalous for their cruelty or abuse of power. Ava Gardner's scandals were born of a desperate desire for authenticity in a fake world. She was too honest and too passionate for the buttoned-up era she inhabited. Her life was messy and complicated, often fueled by alcohol and heartbreak. She wasn't evil, but her life was a constant scandal in the eyes of a society that didn't know what to do with a woman who refused to be anything but herself. The stories of these stars are shocking on their own. But what's more disturbing is that they were allowed to happen, often with the complicity of the very studios that employed them. The golden age of Hollywood wasn't just a collection of actors. It was a powerful system, and that system had its own form of evil. The machinery of the cover dash-up dot at the heart of this machine were studio fixers like MGM's Eddie Mannix. Their job was to protect the studio's biggest assets, its stars, at any cost. When an actor got into trouble, whether it was a drunk driving incident or something far more serious, the studio machine would spring into action. They had connections in police departments and newspaper offices. Negative stories could be squashed, evidence could disappear, and false narratives could be planted to protect the star's public image. This system of silence created a consequence-free environment for the powerful. It emboldened the worst behavior, allowing predators and abusers to continue their careers unchecked while their victims were often silenced. The scandals that did leak out were usually just the tip of the iceberg. This makes the integrity of a man like Burt Lancaster stand out even more. By forming his own production company, he was stepping outside this corrupt system of protection. He was betting on his own principles rather than relying on a studio to manufacture his image and hide his flaws. The real villain of the Golden Age then may not have been a single person, but the system itself, a culture that valued profit over morality and image over reality. In the end, the story of Burt Lancaster and the evil actors of his time is a classic Hollywood tale of illusion versus reality. On screen, Lancaster was a master of menace, but in life, he was a man of principle, an activist, and a pioneer who stood for integrity in an age of corruption. He wasn't a monster. He was just a brilliant actor playing one. The true darkness of the Golden Age wasn't in the scripts, but in the unscripted lives of some of its most beloved stars. It was in the ruthless ambition of Kirk Douglas, forever linked to an unsolved mystery. It was in the casual cruelty of Tony Curtis, whose confessions revealed a deep well of selfishness. It was in the dangerous connections of Frank Sinatra and the beautiful chaos of Ava Gardner. These were the stories the studios tried to bury, the secrets hidden behind the glamour. They remind us that the polished image of the Golden Age was just that, an image. The reality was far messier and infinitely more fascinating. It was a world of saints and sinners, often sharing the same screen, and it was not always easy to tell which was which. So it makes you wonder, who were the real actors in Hollywood's Golden Age? The ones on screen, playing heroes and villains? Or the ones off screen, pretending to be saints in real life? Let us know what you think in the comments below.